pluralism and tolerance are the hallmarks of American democracy. I think the point here is that there's a way of in my view, of trying to, someone said to me, there should be labeling, Israel made a t-shirt in Ariel. Shouldn't it be right to say the t-shirt is made in Ariel and not made inside sovereign Israel? I agree personally. I don't think that is is wrong. I think there should be truth in advertising. But I don't see how it helps solve this conflict by saying, I want to boycott Israeli goods. It doesn't seem to me that that advances us anywhere. Because again, where Ghaith and I are coming from is the belief that we need to create broad coalitions. And if people feel delegitimized, they're not going to be part of that coalition. So let's try to broaden the sense of partnership and not, demonize the other side. If people want to get into recriminations, we could do this for the rest of the semester. There's a lot to go around, but it doesn't help us. It doesn't help us. We're trying to build a coalition for two states. So we got to broaden the circle, not narrow it.
Should I go for it? Okay. My name is Aya. I'm a Palestinian refugee from Lebanon. Oh, thank you. So first of all, thank you both for suggesting activities where both Palestinian and Israeli students get together so that they can understand each perspective. I attended an international high school. It was boarding school, and it was the first time I met an Israeli student. And in the beginning of the first year, it was interesting because we both didn't know each other, had different political views, but by the end of our second years, we were able to have a cafe together and fundraise for Palestinian orphanage in Palestine, which was a really, really great cause. It was really nice to be able to do this with someone who I thought was on the other side, but at the same time, because I'm a Palestinian refugee in Lebanon, I was not allowed to go on the trip to Palestine to be able to see the NGOs we're working with. And in addition to that, a lot of what you said, you said a lot of facts that were very I don't know how to say it, sorry, I have a lot of emotions right now. But you said a lot of things about how Palestinians in Gaza are being treated, and I don't think anybody would be able to disagree, especially because of the news, about how the war is affecting civilians in Gaza. So what can the Palestinians do when they think that their government is corrupted, they have no resources? Whenever there's a war against Hamas or something, a lot of civilians are being killed and attacked. And something that triggered me a little bit was when you said that whenever somebody goes to jail, their governments are being paid for the people who bomb or do damage the most. In many of these cases, it's because there's no one to fund the family. There are no resources for them to get food. So this is what they're getting the money for. So that since their first person, their father, their brother, their someone, is not able to work, bring them money, they're getting donations for that. So, I don't know, there was great words. I think that if people listen to this conversation, a lot of things could be learned, but at the same time, it is contradicting itself. So, what am I supposed to take out of this? Thank you.
Thank you. If it was simple, we would have solved it a long time ago. It is, first of all, it is very difficult, not only from a policy perspective as we deal with it, from an emotional perspective. Make no question. All of us who have dealt with this, I personally, I can't speak about David, but I've had moments where I really questioned what I was doing because of the difficulty and some of the atrocities that you see on the ground. Both sides, by the way, both sides. Let's be clear here. The question I ask myself always is, what would happen if I check out? What would happen if we do nothing? Would that improve anyone's life? So that is a general question. But to your specifics, what can Palestinians in Gaza do? Honestly, I have no idea. I have no idea because right now they have no agency and no space. Hamas is using them. The PA is exploiting them. They don't trust their leaders. They are in a situation where, yes, Israel withdrew, but still Israel controls the border, so they have no real options. So what you end up with? You end up with a lot of anger that gets directed wherever it gets directed. Sometimes against Israel, sometimes against the Palestinians, and that's why, from my perspective, that's why I said, we go to Abbas, to the PA, and say, either you be partners in supporting your own people, or we're gonna bypass you. If we're gonna bypass them, there are ways of doing it. The UN is there, others are there, that we can work through to at least improve the economic humanitarian situation, to start having the underpinnings of the ability to organize politically. First you have to eat, and then you have to organize. So from my perspective, this is why I'm saying I don't see a Palestinian solution to this, I see an international solution to this. What were the two other issues that you raised? This is the one that...
I'll address the one on the money.
Yeah, but the money, if I may as well, this one. Actually, David and I wrote a piece about this more than a year ago now. Basically, no one's saying cut social security for these people. No one, it is not right for people to be punished because a member of their family ends up committing a terrorist attack or whatnot. We're saying two things. First of all, within those in Israeli jail, or at least I'm saying this, within those in Israeli jail, there are ones who are there, you know, frankly, people who are there without trial, administrative detainees, people there for non-violent crimes. Of course, they deserve support from the government. But there is no logic whatsoever in supporting a murderer. And many of these people in jail are murderers. And if their family passes, if their family is in need, and passes the threshold that any other Palestinian family would have to pass to qualify for social security, get social security, like any other country, but do not be rewarded. Don't be punished because one of your family members committed a crime. Don't be rewarded either. And I think this is the challenge, and this is where I believe the PA would have a very strong case to come and say, we will not pay murderers, but there are people there who are innocent or are non-violent, and at the end of the day, we will apply social security to whoever, but will not give a preferential treatment to someone because they were involved in terror attacks.
That's the distinction. I said in my remarks too, maybe, I'll say it again. I said, nobody wants anyone to be destitute, you know, and there should be a basic sense of welfare for anybody, you know, someone goes to jail, their wife, their kids, you don't want anyone in the streets. And maybe some NGOs will want to supplement them, fine. But there should be a basic level. But here, the issue of the stipends is you get triple the national average, the more years you're put in jail. And the jails are often correlated with violence. So the message is the more violent, the more money. That's where I think it is. Now, if a person is not perpetuated violence, it's a different story. But we got to create a sense of partnerships. And if people say, yeah, he's a partner, he's paying people to kill people. That is what we got to break. So when I talked about Aya, is your name? When I talked about singles, I wanted something that's hard for each side. I'm not just saying hard for the Palestinians. The Israelis have to make tough decisions too. They have to, you know, not settle in areas that are going to be a Palestinian state. Each side has got to, I'm putting in my stomach because you got to go to the gut. What are the gut fears of the other side? Palestinian fear is, if we don't do anything, the land's going to go. And it's going to be maybe slow, but it's going to go. And that's why I think there's something has to be done on settlements. And the issue of payment is the gut fears of Israel. Are you incentivizing people for peace or for violence? So I'm trying to be fair on both sides.
By the way, just one last point. You mentioned you're not being able to go and visit that. To be honest, I mean, I see both sides. I mean, we're making these suggestions, though both sides are engaged in what I see as counterproductive kind of processes. On the Palestinian side, the anti-normalization. People who want to engage in what you're engaged with your colleague get penalized, and I think, and by support, by the way, from Palestinian political leaders, and I think this is really dangerous. And on the Israeli side, what we see is a crackdown on left-wing NGOs, coexistence NGOs, and attempts to delegitimize them. I do believe that part of what we can do as a US government, and this is part of what we advocate in Washington, is push both sides to at least stop these kinds of treatments. If there are people who, like yourself and many others like you, who want to do it, don't force anyone to do it. If someone wants to do it, do not penalize them either. And I think this is something that is very legitimate for our government to go and engage both Israelis and Palestinian governments and say, stop these kinds of behaviors.
Time, we'll do like 2 more questions. Sure. What would it take to reconcile the West Bank and Gaza and/or Hamas and Fatah?
You know, I always get the easy ones. They've been trying for 10 years and failed, and there is a reason, to be honest. In my view, reconciliation is not possible because what you have is two organizations with diametrically opposed everything. If you look at the agenda of the platform, the PA, the PLO, Fatah, often interchangeable, have accepted a two-state solution to be reached via diplomacy. This is to create the state of Palestine next to Israel. Hamas advocates for using terror and violence to reach one state, i.e. to destroy Israel. Fatah wants a secular state, Hamas wants a religious, theocratic state. I'm not quite sure who's the brilliant lawyer who can take this and actually come to an agreed principles out of this. So the platforms do not meet. And even if the platforms somehow met, you have another problem, and a deeper problem, and a more difficult problem in reality, which is Hamas has a military wing, a militia, that it simply is unwilling and unable to disband. And my experience, guns and politics do not mix well. If you don't believe me, look at Lebanon, how Hezbollah vowed for years that we will never turn our guns against our Palestinian, our Lebanese brethren, and when there was a crisis, they did exactly that. So with all of this, I don't see reconciliation happening. One side has to win, one side has to lose, and the winning and losing is not military. The winning and losing is conceptual. If the PA, if the PLO can show its public that diplomacy can produce independence, people will follow. If not, and if Hamas's message that only violence works with Israel, Hamas will thrive. So it's really a competition of narratives. The one thing I would say here is that this kind of irreconcilable dynamics in newly established states or proto-states is not unique to the Palestinians. It actually, in many new nations, we've seen this. In Israel, it was a very specific incident called Al-Talaina, where there was a challenge about what's the character of the state, and that was resolved using violence. In Jordan, we saw it. In this country, we saw it, and we called it the civil war. At the end of the day, one of the two, these are irreconcilable narratives, one will have to win. The others will not disappear, by the way. My in-laws are in North Carolina, and I know that civil war is still alive and well in this country. But the winner defines what the rules of the game are, and the winner defines the character of the state, and the loser will have to play by these kind of rules. Until there's a winner and a loser, I simply don't see reconciliation. And the question is, when there's no reconciliation, as we talked about, how can you ensure that the people of Gaza do not pay the price of these political wranglings?
I think that's why, at least on the economic infrastructure piece of Gaza, I think there needs to be things that are improved. And it's hard when Hamas is in charge, because they might claim the credit for it, but you don't want a situation that people don't have drinking water by 2020. You don't want a situation you only have a few hours of electricity a day. It might be Hamas's fault that they can't get along with the Egyptians, they can't get along with the PA, they can't get along with Israel. Whoever it is, but the point is you want to minimize the human suffering at the very time. I mean, Ghaith's point is a correct one, which is, they're, at the end of the day, even though more recently they've kind of said, Abbas, you could govern Gaza, but we keep our guns. And the problem in the Middle East is the people, who kind of fire the shots, call the shots. So once you keep the guns, what you're saying is, you know what, you could have day-to-day responsibility, but we have ultimate authority. And that's why there has to be agreed rules of the game. And right now, Hamas isn't willing to do that. And but what you want to do at the same time is minimize human suffering at the same time. There's been some efforts lately with the U.S., with the Europeans, to try to address some of the more economic emergency dimensions of Gaza, which I hope do continue. But Hamas is not found a way out of its dilemma. It says we have the right to guns. And that makes all solutions very hard. Internal to the Palestinians, leaving even Israel out of it. Abbas doesn't want to go in because he said, why should I go in? If they keep the guns, any decision they don't like, they'll shoot. So it's a very difficult situation.
How is it possible?
Ask questions at the same time.
We have what? How is it possible to reach peace when one side is clearly more powerful than the other? Can we reach a state where both sides have equal political powers?
Look, the problem is that again, again, the idea is to create a sense of partnership. Israel feels it is in a rough neighborhood, being in the Middle East, where there have been a lot of wars against it. The Palestinians and Abbas, and to me that has been part of his leadership, has said, we're willing to be demilitarized. And so you might say, well, that's not equal. Why, if they're demilitarized, then how is that going to work? But the fact is, because there are 20 other Arab states, that makes it a little easier for Abbas, in one Jewish state and over 20, 21 Arab states, for Abbas to come to that conclusion. I don't think he'd feel the same way if the ratios were reversed. So in that sense, there's not complete parity. But if there was a sense of two states, in my view, the economics would change. We saw the numbers shoot up in the 90s during Oslo, where GDP per capita went up. Yes, and maybe was not as high, obviously, as in Israel, that's got a very kind of Western high-tech economy. So I'm not here to say that there will be parity on GDP per capita, but we see that peace will bring prosperity. So I think two-state solution would have the Palestinians gaining economically, and they would have agency. They would have a voice to determine their own future. And that, to me, is very important.
I have a much shorter answer. The answer is simply no. There will be no parity. This is a fact of life. Israel is one of the most powerful, it's the most powerful nation in the region and one of the most powerful internationally. This is a fact of life. And it will not change anytime soon. If we're going to wait for peace until that changes, we're going to wait for a very, very, very long time. This is the reality. We deal with the reality, and we have to understand and accept, on both sides though, even though there is power inequality, peace will require very difficult sacrifices from both sides at a very gut level. The Palestinians very strongly believe that all of historic Palestine is theirs, and they have to give up some of it. And the Israelis and the Jewish people feel that all of the Holy Land is theirs, and this is what you see in the Bible, and they have to give part of them. There is no parity, and at the end of the day, there is pain that both have to deal with. The sooner we do it, the sooner we're going to get beyond this.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. We encourage you to continue these conversations between you and your friends and your family. But again, please help me in thanking David and Ghaith.
Ghaith has to go catch a plane, but if there's any questions that I can deal with, we didn't deal with, I'm here to help whatever you like. So I'll stay till the last question.
By the way, I've been in enough talks myself, and I've listened to enough lectures that I know most of you will forget most of what we said. Please remember that a Jew and an Arab can sit there and actually have a conversation. If you remember this, I think we've done our job. Thank you very much for being here.